Real-world computer programming for kids of all ages. Step 57. HTML, CSS, and jQuery all in one file. Hello again, everyone. We have seen the combination of HTML, CSS, and jQuery work harmoniously together in a kind of artificial environment, JS Fiddle. Let's make it work on our own or on its own, away from an environment like that. We won't be able to see any progress, though, until we actually run our file, but that's okay. Now, normally in a website or project or app, you separate your HTML, CSS, and jQuery code into various files, HTML files, CSS files, and JS files. Everything is categorized and organized, and you might end up with several different of each kind of those files in different places. And that's as it needs to be or should be. But as a teaching tool, I'm going to show you in this step how it is possible to incorporate all of those things into a single file. Well, two files if you count the jQuery helper file that we will use that somebody else wrote. The reason that this is even possible to mix HTML, CSS, and jQuery code together in one file is because HTML allows you to incorporate those other elements, CSS and JavaScript or jQuery, inline, in the same file, embedded. So just to be clear, the preferred method and the usual method, or way of going about things, is to have the CSS and CSS files, the JavaScript or jQuery and JS files, and the HTML and HTML or HTML files. But it is possible to combine them in one file. I will show you the non-redundant parts of a file that does that. I am bolding the CSS portion and italicizing the jQuery part. Note, the loading of the jQuery files within the script tags, a few lines from the top, is not itself jQuery. It's just pulling in those jQuery files. Note, too, that the third script tag contains no web address, simply the name of the jQuery file. For that reason, we need to have a local copy of that file sitting in the same folder as this file. Where src follows script, that code is being referenced, sort of like a using clause in C#. On the other hand, where type equals text / JavaScript follows script, jQuery code itself follows, as you'll see below in the italicized portion of the file. And then it shows an entire file of all these things mixed together. There's several lines of HTML, then several lines of CSS within a style tag. Several states are listed that are going to be in a select widget. Not all of them are shown because it's redundant. Then there's a little bit of jQuery. Actually, there's a lot of jQuery, but most of it is elided because it's all basically the same, different numbers, but it's all loading the views of various states. So only a few are actually shown, and then it goes back to some HTML at the end. I'm not going to describe what all this code does, as that's not the point of this exercise. The point is to show that you can, although you usually won't, cram all your HTML, CSS, and jQuery into one file and run it. You see that the CSS is embedded within a style HTML tag, and the jQuery is embedded within a script tag. So what happens if you have all this code in one text.txt file and double-click it? Nothing. Well, it opens up a notepad so that you can see all that code, or markup, if you will. But what if you change the extension of the file from txt to htm? As txt is declaring to the computer, I'm a text file, use Notepad to open me. When the extension is htm, it is saying instead, I'm an HTML page. open me in a browser. So what happens when we double-click that file after changing its extension to HTML? It opens in a web browser. And if you have the referenced gomap.js file in the same folder, the jQuery code is able to execute. You should see something like this. This is with the Select HTML widget dropped down, displaying some of its options. And it shows a screenshot of that. Not great, but it works. The Select widget, similar to a Windows control, appears in the northwest corner of the page with its 52 entries. You can't see them all in the screenshot, but you can scroll down and find the state you wanted to focus in on. This is how the map changes if I select Missouri from the options. And it shows a screenshot of that. The code behind that, what fires when the user selects Missouri from the Select widget is, and it shows those few lines of jQuery code calling the gomap jQuery file. Where you center the map, latitude and longitude values that are shown above are a key part of getting this to work right, along with setting the most appropriate zoom level, 7 for Missouri, 5, a couple steps farther out for the U.S. You want to focus in as close as you can, but without cutting off any part of the state. Here, though, it's a bit hard to make out what we're looking at. Fortunately, Google Maps offers various types of views. What you see above is terrain view, as specified in the code on first showing the map, the entire lower 48 or contiguous states of the United States. And then it shows that jQuery code where map type is set to terrain. As mentioned already, other options are available. For example, if I change the Missouri-specific jQuery shown previously to this, adding one line, map type, setting it to default, and then it shows the entire load Missouri function again with that change, that addition, it now looks like this. And there's another screenshot of that same area, but a different view of it. Instead of terrain, it's a regular map view. A little better, perhaps. Certainly not ready for prime time. We would want to spiffy this up before showing this to anybody. But that brings up a question. Can others see this web page of ours? No. This is the conversation that would take place if I tried to share it with somebody. Not anybody, but somebody. Me. Hey, check out my webpage. It's got a map of the USA, and you can zero in on any state you choose from a list. Somebody. Cool. What's the Earl? Me. Earl? You mean Steve Earl? What? Somebody. No, the URL. What's the web address so I can check it out? Me. You see, the page only exists locally for me when I run or double-click the HTML or HTML file. You can see that in the address bar of the first screenshot or two. The file is running from a local directory or folder of mine, not an HTTPS address or URL, a web address. Of course, I could share the HTML page with my friend or acquaintance, but I would also have to give them the gomap.js file and tell them how to set things up for it to work so that they would be able to actually see anything. So what we have here, besides possibly a failure to communicate, is not really a web page because it's not available on the web, but it is an HTML page, which is the technology the web uses to display its pages. That's the last thing I wanted to show you before we get started with the actual building of a website. We will take that up in the next step. Until then,